came about on my trip to Ireland. I visited a relative and was fascinated to learn that she had growing in her garden a pear tree that had been struck twice by lightning. The tree looked healthy, but my relative said that its once prolific annual yield of luscious pears had now diminished to a few hard, inedible ones. Once back in Australia, I used the pear tree as the main subject for a three-part Australian story, and include the cliched idea of old age and cunning beats youth and exuberance any day. I must have been successful enough with this, as the pear tree won second prize in the Victorian Sunraysia 2006 U3A writing competition. Oh, startled, Nana stared at her 14-year-old granddaughter. "What did you say, dear?" she asked. "I said Dad's got the axe in the car," Belinda answered. "He said, when he comes back, he's going to chop down your old tree today. Said it's an eyesore and needs to come down." Flicking her long dark hair back as she leaned over the newly baked muffins, Belinda sniffed appreciatively at the sweet-smelling steam rising from them, unaware of the change her statement had created in her grandmother. "Drat that son of mine," Nana thought. "Since his father died, he always thinks he knows what's best for me. Well, I don't want my old pear tree chopped down." She sighed and wiped her hands on her apron. "Next, he'll be wanting me removed too. Too old to live here alone now Dad has gone," he'll say. "I'll be more comfortable in a retirement home," he'll tell me. "And just like the pear tree, I'll be uprooted and expected to go without so much as a whimper." Her lips set in a determined line. "Well, I'm not going. And neither is that pear tree. That pear tree and me, we're here to stay until I say differently." Pouring the contents of a mixing bowl into 2 cake tins, Nana slid them into the oven and glanced up, her attention momentarily taken by a print on the wall behind her granddaughter. The scene was of a muscular, dark-haired man felling trees in the bush, while his young wife and baby sat under a tree nearby and watched him. Looking at her granddaughter, she asked innocently, "Did anyone ever tell you the story about the pear tree?" Belinda shook her head. "Well, to me it was the greatest love story ever," Nana said, sitting on the stool next to Belinda. "Better than any of those Jane Austen novels you love to read." 20. "Oh, Nan," laughed Belinda. Nana tapped Belinda's arm. "Well, just you listen and make up your mind," she said. Her gaze flicked to the print on the wall and back to her granddaughter. "Did you know your grandfather and I were childhood sweethearts?" Nana said. Belinda shook her head. Nodding, Nana glanced back at the print. This area was all bush when we moved here just after we were married, and your grandfather built this house with his bare hands. She sighed. Yes, our little love nest, he called it. And when your father was born 12 months later, your grandfather planted that pear tree as a token of his love. It was the most romantic, the best present I've ever had, she said softly. What? That old pear tree. Belinda looked out the window at the tree. It's what it symbolizes, dear, Nana said. Your grandfather always believed that wherever that tree grew, so did our love, and so it did. Oh, Nan. That is so romantic. Belinda's eyes were moist. Of course the tree was quite small when your grandfather planted it, but it did have one tiny pink blossom on its frail. Little branch. Nana touched Belinda's arm. Now, upstairs, in my wardrobe, is our family photo album, and pressed between its pages is a tiny, faded blossom, she said. It's that first little pear tree flower. If you promise to look after it, I'll entrust it to you for safekeeping. Oh, Nana, thank you. I will look after it. Belinda hugged her grandmother. I'll go and get it now. Nana looked up as her youngest grandson slouched into the kitchen. Nana, I'm bored, he complained. When will Daddy be back? I want to go home. There's nothing to do here. Nana smiled at her 7-year-old grandson. His fine brown hair had fallen over his forehead, hiding the freckles there. Bored, are you? She said. Well, come have some milk and cake and I'll tell you a story. I'm not a baby. You don't need to tell me stories, he said belligerently. Nana hid a smile. No, indeed, Dennis, she said. This story is about the bushrangers that used to live in these parts. Dennis glanced up, his face brightening. There used to be bushrangers here, Nana. Yep, there sure were. Lightning Jack and his gang used to roam these parts. Smiling, Nana patted the stool near her. Come and sit here and I'll tell you all about them, she said. Now, nobody knows for sure, but some say Lightning Jack became a bushranger when he was put in jail on trumped-up charges. Then, remembering her grandson's love of animals, she added, and while he was in jail there was no one to look after his farm animals and they all died of hunger and thirst. Dennis gasped. Well, you can imagine, After that he really hated the law, Nana added. Dennis nodded. He understood. He was a real Robin Hood bushranger, robbing the rich to give to the poor. All the people loved him, but the troopers hated him because they couldn't catch him, and that made them look real bad. "21. Well, one day, Lightning Jack and some of his gang were riding along when what do they see but a group of uniformed troopers riding along looking for them. Dennis' eyes widened. Did the troopers see them, Nana? Oh, yes, young Dennis, and a great shout went up from the troopers when they did. The chase was in open country and, lying flat over their horse's neck, the horsemen all rode like the wind. Slapping her hand to her side, Nana leaned forward emulating the riders. Strands of grey hair escaped from behind her ears, and she quickly brushed them back. Now, the bushrangers were riding mountain ponies, and everyone knows mountain ponies are bred tough with strong hearts that just won't give in, but they aren't made for speed in the open country. Those tough little ponies gave it all they had, but the troopers were catching up fast. Nana paused. Go on, Nana. What happened? Well, a trooper's bullet hit one of the horses and down went the horse, and down came his rider. But she added, quick as came from a picture in a book called The History of the World. It showed an Aztec or Inca pyramid temples and village life around it. I took it from there. 000. Happy birthday, birthday boy, I said as I looked at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. Yep. 50 years old today and not looking a day over. I tilted my head and looked critically at my face. Mournful, bloodshot eyes stared back. What was it Jody had said? They're not wrinkles, Dad, they're laughter lines. Well, Jody, I've got news for you. Nobody laughs that much. I pulled at my jowls, then let them sag back. Just like a floppy bloodhound, I moaned. What happened? Where's the guy I used to be? I stared into my eyes, desperately seeking, wishing him back. Just one more time, I'd like to see me when I was the fittest I've ever been. That's not asking too much on my birthday, is it? I called out in despair. My vision blurred and I rubbed my eyes with my knuckles to clear it. What? Who's that? That's not my reflection. I rubbed my eyes again and stared hard. An ancient simian head was watching me from inside the mirror. His dark piercing eyes looked intently into mine, mesmerizing me, and I couldn't tear my gaze away. A mist swirled out from the mirror, turning, spinning, whirling, spinning, obliterating everything but the power of his stare, and, locked into it, I was sucked, head first, through the mirror, toward him. There was a roaring sound all around me, as some force pulled me further into the mist. Disorientated, I shot by hazy outlines, feeling like a comet rocketing through space and time. At some stage I slowed down, everything became quiet and just sort of drifted. Then I seemed to slowly descend until felt something solid underfoot. The mist cleared and I was on top of a tall stone building. I was alone. Where am I? What's going on? Totally confused, I turned, trying to get my bearings and make sense of what was happening. Help me, somebody, I whimpered, scared and desperate for something, anything to help me, yet frightened of what might be there with me. Stepping back from the edge, I stumbled and the rough stone surface scraped my palms as I landed heavily on them, but I didn't feel it. I was too astounded at what I had just seen. Crawling closer to the edge, I peered over again, not believing my eyes. Stretching below me was what appeared to be an ancient city. In the pre-dawn light, golden-skinned people were milling about below. Most wore brightly colored cloaks like mats, draped over their naked torsos. Some had decorated feathered bands in their shoulder-length dark hair. All were barefooted. A few workers, dressed only in loincloths, trudged along the street, carrying woven baskets or bundles of wood on their backs. Thin columns of smoke drifted out from flat-roof white adobe buildings, and beyond were all lush, tropical vegetation and steep mountains as far as my eyes could see. 25. I couldn't believe what I was seeing and, terrified that I was losing my mind, I tried to focus. Where am I wondered. And more important, how am I going to get out of here and back home? I studied the structure I was on. It was the tallest building, and on either side were two smaller, identical shaped buildings. All were fortified, flat-top pyramids, with a double row of steps going up their center front. About a dozen paces in from the top of the steps of this pyramid was a big, stone slab. Past that, like the jewel in a crown, was a heavily ornate building, its pale color resembling the stars. Boy, oh boy! I know what that is. Greed replaced fear, and I raced over, embracing, rubbing my cheek against the smooth surface and stroking the shiny exterior. Gold sheeting. Well, why not take a piece, I thought. I glanced around. Who's to know? I dug at the corner of the wall with my fingernails, trying to peel some of the gold off. Damn! It held fast and I skinned my fingers, drawing blood. The sound of slow rhythmic beating of drums drifted up, distracting me, and I hurried to the edge to look down. A solemn procession of men was making their way to the pyramids. I lay flat and watched 12 drummers, in white loincloths, pounding a dirge on their kettle drums. Geez. They're made of gold. I chuckled inanely. Talk about beaten gold. Now, if I could get one of those babies back home with me, I tore my gaze away to watch the parade. The crowd was hushed as the procession moved past. Behind the drummers were two men, assumed to be high priests. They were dressed in long, bright, yellow-feathered cloaks, their edges touching the unpaved roadway as they walked. Large, yellow-feathered headgear adorned their heads. Behind them, looking confident and proud, walked a kid of about 20. Jet black shoulder-length hair fell loosely to his shoulders, and on his head was a gold wreath. His muscular chest was covered by a golden breastplate, and on his upper arms were big, gold bangles. A pristine white loincloth covered his hips and, like the others, he was barefoot. Behind him, in 2 lines, were 10 men dressed in orange. Lesser priests, I guessed. The procession arrived at the steps of the pyramid I was on and started to climb. Oh! They mustn't find me. Edging back, I ran inside the golden temple and hid, wheeling them away. The drummers had stopped beating their drums and it became quiet outside. I waited, and when I didn't hear any further sounds, curiosity overcame my fear and I peered out. In lines of 3 the drummers stood near the edge of the pyramid walls, their golden drums silent. The 10 minor priests stood on either side of a stone altar, facing it. The 2 high priests flanked the youth in front of the altar. All were still, watching the faint, pink rays of the rising sun, stretching like a halo from behind the mountains. When the sun edged the mountain tops, its rays strengthening to crimson, flooding the valley with light, one of the priests stepped forward and lifted the golden wreath from the boy's head. Another unclasped the ornate breastplate, while a 3rd priest removed his armbands. Laying the golden objects at the feet of one of the high priests, they stepped back into line. It must be some sort of religious ritual to the sun, I guessed. The high priest removed something from under his cape and I strained to get a better look. I gasped. It was a jewel-encrusted gold container, shaped like a genie bottle. Holding it in both hands, he stepped up to the youth, bowed and offered the container to him. Solemnly, the boy took it, raised it high and saluted to the 4 winds. I stared at the bottle. It glowed, radiating an aura, a life of its own. Facing the sun, the youth muttered something, an incantation perhaps. I couldn't hear what it was. Then, taking a deep breath, he drained the contents of the container. 26. The other high priest stood in front of the youth and unwrapped the youth's loincloth. Standing naked, he looked golden-skinned, healthy, muscular and magnificent. Perfect man. Everything I aspired to be and could never achieve. What's happening now? I edged out a fraction more to see. 2 of the orange-clad priests were slowly moving their arms, in silent rhythmic gestures, over and around the youth. He stood completely still, staring ahead, while they performed this ritual. Then when they'd finished, they stepped back and he climbed unaided onto the altar and lay there, face up. What? I don't understand. Something weird is happening to me. How can I be looking from the altar and here at the same time? I blinked several times and wiped my face along my sleeve to clear my vision, but it stayed the same. The boy smiled and my lips curved too. No. I shook my head, trying to clear it. Somehow he was influencing me. I clamped my lips tight. A faint memory stirred. When the sun strikes the golden temple, Tinamaka will cleave my beating heart from my chest. The heart of a warrior prince. The gods are waiting to claim me. I shivered and looked behind me. Where in the hell did all that rubbish come from? Nobody spoke. It was in my head. Am I going mad? I was terrified. Then the penny dropped and I shuddered, not wanting to believe. Somehow I'm reliving the past. That kid is me, and I'm going to be sacrificed. Offered to some pagan god. The hairs on my neck stood up and I was clammy with fear. The high priest raised a jewel-handled, double-edged knife. Its long, white blade glinted in the crimson rays of the sun, and I cringed, sick to my stomach, petrified. I crouched in the sanctuary of the golden temple, while at the same time looking up from the altar into the expressionless eyes of the priest. I stared, transfixed. They're the same dark eyes from the mirror. No. He's going to slice me straight down the middle. I wanted to rush over and stop him, but fear kept me paralyzed. The sun's rays reached the golden tower, blinding me in a scarlet light. I heard the swift slice of the blade through the air, the thud and tearing sound. No! No! I screamed as my world started to spin. Crimson, golden, silver, a kaleidoscope of blinding colors, blending, spinning, spinning. Then nothing else but the misty whirlpool pulling at me, drawing me headfirst into the vortex. He murdered me, was all I could think. He murdered me. The thought kept repeating itself in my brain like a cracked record. My head stopped spinning and, still disorientated, I opened my eyes. The mist was gone and I was alone in my bathroom. Emotionally spent, I vomited into the basin. A thin line of saliva dribbled from my lips, and I wiped it off with the back of my hand. My fingers were sore, and wondering why, I glanced at them. The nails on my right hand were broken and torn, my fingertips raw. I shivered. I did that trying to peel the gold off the temple. 27. Date with the Devil. This story came about as another group writing exercise. A random word and then a sentence were chosen from a book, and a story was to be constructed by merging them into a story. Adrenaline was the word, and I've dreamed the same dream was the sentence. 000. I slid further into the undergrowth as the beams from the torches probed, searching for us in the darkness. 5 of us hid there, hearts hammering, sweating, not daring to move as the Germans methodically beat the bushes, looking for us. Rivulets of water ran off the leaves and trickled down my neck, soaking me. The sodden earth was cold and I could feel my right leg starting to cramp. Was it really the heavy cloud-cutting visibility that confused the pilot into dropping us at the wrong place? I wondered, trying to ignore the spasm in my leg. Why didn't the captain abort the mission when the weather turned bad? How will we meet up with the Belgian underground now? And just where the hell behind enemy lines are we anyway? Maybe Jonge is right. Maybe this trip is cursed. A German boot came within inches of my face and my heart lurched, pounding hard. I knew what to expect if they caught us. Torture, then shot as spies. I held my breath, waiting for him to yell to his comrades that he'd found the Englishman, but he moved on, searching, moving further away with the rest of his group. Still we lay there in the mud. After about 10 minutes, I heard a rustling nearby, as Captain Booth stirred. "Okay, lads," he whispered. Quietly and quickly. "There may be more about." Adrenaline surged through me as we emerged from the foliage and, Indian file, with rifles ready, moved in the opposite direction to the way the Germans had gone. I knew that any minute a burst of gunfire could flash out of the darkness, putting paid to us and our mission, so I strained, all senses alerted, trying to hear any warning sounds in the forest as we hurried along. We passed huge, uprooted, dying trees lying in crazy angles next to fresh bomb craters, while patches of bare ground, denuded of any growth, exposed raw, jagged gashes in the earth. It felt spooky, and a chill ran up my spine as I remembered Jonge's dream and the scared sound in his voice as he told me. It's nearly a year since I had the first one, and I'm telling you, Clarky, I've been given a warning. I laughed and opened my mouth to give some smart aleck comment, but his expression made me change my mind. I figured he needed to talk about what was bothering him, so I waited while he gathered his thoughts. "It's been recurring," See, the dream, he'd said. In the first one, I was alone, in a fog, a real peace super. I couldn't tell where I was, but it was somewhere dark and creepy, and I felt miserable, cold and wet. Then somebody stepped out of the shadows and stood beside me. I couldn't move to see who it was. They were just a silent, dark blob next to me. But 28. There was a terrible feeling of malevolence all around us, as thick as the fog, and we were both trapped in it, helpless. I woke up terrified at, I don't know, a horrible feeling of impending doom. I stared at him as he wiped his sweaty hands down the side of his fatigues and fumbled for his cigarettes. We'd been in battles together, and I'd never seen him this scared before. I've dreamed the same dream 3 more times, and each time another faceless, dark shape comes and stands in the heavy fog. There are 5 of us now. All helpless, not able to move, waiting for something, or someone to do, I don't know what. I know it sounds crazy, but the feeling is evil, and I always wake up in a sweat of fear. He stopped speaking, while he scratched around in his pockets looking for a match to light his cigarette. I remained silent, not sure what to make of what Jonge was saying. I have bet a month's pay he'd be one of the last people to be spooked by a nightmare. Sucking hard on his cigarette, he filled his lungs with smoke, exhaled, then continued. In the last dream a few nights ago, a cloaked figure stepped out of the shadows and stood, looking at us. The hood he was wearing hid his face, but his eyes glowed like 2 red-hot coals. Then his hood slid off, and we were looking into the face of the devil. In slow motion he extended his covered arm, pointed his bony index finger, and slowly moved it along our line. As he pointed at each one of us, the fog cleared from around that person, and I could see who was there. Clarky, there was you, the captain, Sark, Porter, and me. Jonge sucked hard on his cigarette like it was a lifeline. He coughed and continued speaking. Then the devil started slowly moving his finger back along our line, and I knew now why I'd been so scared. I knew without a shadow of a doubt that whoever he stopped at was a dead man, but I woke up petrified before his pointing finger stopped. Jonge's words had sent a chill up my spine, but I tried to sound flippant, passing it off as a joke. So one of us had a year to go, and their time is nearly up. Jonge's hoarse whispered reply echoed around in my head. Yeah, well, if it's not an omen, how come there are 5 of us on this mission? The same 5 as in my dream. I shivered, feeling as if someone had just stepped onto my grave. The track we were on widened a fraction before ending at a narrow country road. We stopped, waiting to see if anybody came along. Nobody did, so after a few minutes Captain Booth signaled it was safe to proceed and, cautiously, still in single file, we moved onto the side of the road and, keeping to the edge, eased along. The rain had eased and a feeble moon was struggling through the clouds. The forest was sparser now, as if there had been some sort of clearing done. The captain was leading and without warning he moved off the road. We followed him onto a grassy section that I first thought was part of an estate, but I gave a start when I recognized where we were and glanced behind at Jonge to see his reaction. He didn't look too happy either and stared stonily ahead. The old graveyard hadn't escaped the bombing. Its huge day elm trees, mostly split, had branches twisted like frozen arthritic hands, reaching upward. A thick grey low-lying fog hung suspended, and our bodies easing through caused it to rise up, only to settle back again as we move on. We edged past graves, their broken headstones lying at crazy angles. Onward, we went, toward the center of the cemetery. It gave me the creeps being in this colorless, lifeless landscape, and I wished I was anywhere but here. The soaking rain had started again, making our saturated woolen uniforms heavier. It was freezing in the graveyard and I was chilled to the bone. All feeling had gone from my fingers, and as I tried to move them to get the blood circulating, I hoped I didn't have to use my rifle. I was a goner if I did. Captain Booth stopped and signaled for the sergeant to check out a damaged building up ahead, while the rest of us waited nerves taut, listening. It seemed like ages before he returned. "All clear," he whispered. 29. The captain nodded and quickly we followed him in through the bombed side of the stone building and down into the crypt. "Well, man, we'll shelter here for the night, and in the morning, we'll try to work out where we are and how to find the resistance movement. We don't know if there are any Germans nearby, so we can't risk lighting a fire." Great, I thought. So, frozen and bone-weary, Jonge, me and Porter huddled together to keep warm. Captain Booth flipped the cover off his watch and peered at its luminous face. "It's 2300 hours, he said. You'll each do a 2-hour guard duty through the night." He nodded toward Jonge. "Take the first shift, Stern." "Yes, sir." I could tell by Jonge's voice he wasn't too happy with the timing of his roster, but there wasn't anything he could do. Orders are orders. The captain's gaze swept around the chamber. Move to that corner position, Private. You can cover both entrances from there, and at 100 hours Clark will relieve you. Yes, sir, we both answered. Jonge took up his position, while I settled against Porter and tried to sleep. I don't know how long I slept for, but I was shocked back to reality by a high-pitched scream that frightened the hell out of me. Wide awake, the four of us scrambled up, rifles swinging, trying to get a beat on the enemy, but there was nobody in the crypt with us. "What is the matter with you, Stern?" the captain hissed. "Do you want to bring the whole German army down on our heads?" We all turned to Jonge. In the pale light of the moon we could just see him. He was backed up as far as he could against the wall, and he was shaking and jabbering like he was having a fit, or something. "He's here. He's come to get me," he babbled, eyes wide, staring. "What are you talking about, man?" demanded the captain. "Who's here to get you?" "The devil. I heard him outside. The sound of his cloven hoofs scraping on the graves, getting closer. Look!" Jonge screamed, pointing. "He's here. It's the devil." We spun around and looked at the doorway. The moon silhouetted an outline there. My legs went weak and I staggered as I recognized the long curved horns, the animal-shaped head, that odd, misshapen body. Jonge's dream. It was a premonition. Bile rose in my throat and I wanted to scream out to the creature, "Don't pick me. I'm not ready to die," but I couldn't. Time seemed to have ceased moving for me. We all seemed suspended in time. It moved first. Stepping into the doorway, it bleated once, then nimbly clambered over the fallen stonework and disappeared back into the mist. I was the first to react. "You bloody idiot," Jonge yelled. "It was a goat you heard. Not the devil, a bloody billy goat." Relief surged through me in waves. I wasn't going to die, after all. "You and your dream," I said, turning to him. "That's the last dream you ever tell me." There was no reply. "Jonge." I took a closer look. He was slumped against the crypt's wall, slack-jawed, eyes staring, lifeless. 30. The wedding dress. This was a writing exercise, in which I attempted to combine several short stories, all linked by a common thread, in this case, a wedding dress. And just what's going on here? Deidre stood in the doorway, staring at the couple on the bed. They sprung apart. Deidre, darling, it's not what it looks like, the man babbled. No, Luann gasped. I was just helping Tony with his trousers. Really, Luann? The bridesmaid is supposed to assist the bride on her wedding day, not the groom. The contempt in Deidre's voice cut through the air like a laser. Tony grabbed Deidre. Darling, listen to me. This is all a horrible mistake. I love you. Deidre's self-control snapped. Well, I don't like your way of loving, she shouted. Putting every ounce of her weight behind her bald fist, Deidre swung hard and punched Tony in the face. Tony staggered under the blow. Wide-eyed, Luann ducked out of sight behind the bed. I wouldn't marry you if you were the last man on earth. You. Deidre screamed. Deidre, darling. Just listen to me. Tony rushed after Deidre as she ran down the hall pulling at her wedding dress, struggling to get it off. There goes the bride. There goes the bride. Dum. There goes the bride, Luann hummed, smiling. She walked over and closed the door on the shrieking turmoil down the hall. The two women looked at the wedding dress in the window of the bridal hire shop. No. I won't wear a second-hand wedding dress. I'd feel like second-hand rose. Tonya, face facts. Your dress was lost in transit. It's 2 days to your wedding. We can't get another dress made in time, and none of the others you've tried on suit you. Tonya glowered at her mother, not wanting to listen. This shop is our last hope if you want to get married on Saturday. You do want to get married, don't you, Tonya? But not in someone else's dress, she muttered. Tonya, her mother said. This dress has the love and happiness of the bride who wore it. It will be a lucky charm for you. Tonya brooded as she stared in the window. What do you say, love? Shall we go inside? Nothing's going right for my wedding, muttered Tonya. It's an omen, I just know it. Near tears, she followed her mother inside. The weather is just perfect for your wedding day, Tonya. And you look beautiful in your wedding dress, Rita, Tonya's mother said as she stood behind her daughter and tucked a wayward curl under Tonya's veil. Tonya surveyed her reflection. She had to admit she did look special. When the wedding party arrived, the small church was full of friends and well-wishers. The groom and his two attendants, Tonia's brothers, entered and stood in front of the minister. Organ pipes reverberated to the chords of "Here Comes the Bride," as everyone craned to get a look at the bridal party entering the church. A tiny golden-haired flower girl, dressed in white taffeta, led the way. She clutched a white satin basket, while her small, chubby fingers reached in and gathered red rose petals to scatter. The two bridesmaids followed, dressed in long, blue satin gowns. They stepped slowly, in time, to the organ music, staring ahead, bodies rigid, their bouquets quivering in their trembling hands. All eyes turned to Tonia as, head bowed, face hidden behind her wedding veil, glided down the aisle, holding the arm of her proud father. A woman running late quietly sat down in the last pew and leaned forward to watch the ceremony. "Dearly beloved," the minister intoned. The warmth of the afternoon sun and the heavy fragrance of the blooms was having a sleepy effect on the congregation. "And if there is anyone here who has reason why this wedding should not proceed, let them speak now, or forever hold their peace." The minister paused and glanced at the congregation. "Yes, I do. I have a reason why this marriage should not proceed," a voice from the back of the church called. "What?" The minister's jaw dropped in astonishment. Hayes turned, staring at the woman walking down the aisle and who now stood in front of the bridal pair. Whispers started from the congregation, growing louder. "Who is she? What did she say? What's happening?" Jeffrey's face was chalk white as he stared at the newcomer. Tonia looked from Jeffrey to the woman and back to Jeffrey before asking, "Do you know her, Jeffrey?" "Well, do you?" "Answer your bride, Jeffrey," the woman said. "Tell her who I am." Jeffrey's mouth opened several times, but no sound came out. His gaze slid from one woman to the other. "I'm sorry to spoil your wedding day," the stranger said to Tonia. "My name is Lenore Delaney. I am Jeffrey's legal wife." "But Jeffrey never said he'd been married," said Tonia. "And still is," Lenore answered. 32. "Oh, Mum," wailed Tonia, turning and running to her parents. Tonia's brothers reacted quickly. Outside Jeffrey, they said, grabbing the groom and frog-marching him toward the door. "We have something to discuss with you." Pauline ran her left hand down the long, white satin skirt while she studied her reflection. Her well-formed breasts swelled and thrust out as she took a deep breath. Fascinated by her reflection, she pirouetted and watched the long satin skirt swirl before the weight of the pearls at the hemline settled it back into place. "It's a beautiful dress," she thought. "I wonder who wore it before." Pauline played with the pearls at the neckline. She watched her image. "Too bad it's only for him," she thought. She smiled at her reflection. "The old fool can't last forever though. As long as I play the dutiful wife and keep him happy until he kicks the bucket, the money will be all mine." "Who says you can't have it all?" she gloated. Turning to the assistant, Pauline said, "Yes. I'll take this one." "Oh, Madam looks wonderful in it," the assistant asked as she helped Pauline out of the gown. "That dress fits as if it was made for you." Pauline nodded, her mind already on other things. "Well, my dear, did you find your wedding dress?" the old man asked when Pauline entered the room. Smiling, she nodded and kissed his cheek as she sat down beside him. "I hope you let me buy it for you. It's not every day a woman gets married." "Oh, Malcolm, don't be upset with me, but I wanted to purchase my own wedding gown. Plenty of time to spend up big on me after we're married," Pauline thought. She took his hand and looked at it. Her thumb traced the bony ridges showing through the thin, parchment-like skin of the back of his hand. "With all that's wrong with him, I wonder how much longer he'll last," she mused. Malcolm patted her hand. "You've given me a new lease on life," he said. "Oh, yes," she thought. "Just wait until you see the equipment I've bought for our wedding night. If you survive the first week of our marriage, you deserve to keep all your money. Now my lawyer, Charles, will be here tomorrow with the marriage celebrant. Are you sure you don't have anyone to invite to our wedding?" Pauline shook her head. "Not likely," she thought. "I'm not letting my blood-sucking relatives know I'm marrying money. Then Charles and Mrs. Turner will be our witnesses." Pauline smiled. "You are so capable, Malcolm. You think of everything. And I have a little wedding present for you, my dear. It was to be a surprise, but I want to share it with you now. I instructed Charles to draw up a contract and bring it with him for my signature. No, Malcolm. It isn't necessary, Pauline murmured. I know, he said. But tomorrow we will have a sizable blue-chip portfolio of property and shares as my wedding present to you. $33. Oh, Malcolm, she whispered. You are so good to me. She leaned over and kissed him on the cheek. Oh, boy, she thought. Santa's coming early. Pauline was awake before her alarm rang. She lay in bed and smiled as she looked at her wedding dress. No more second-hand, cast-off clothes for me, she thought. Her mind wandered to the luxury she would indulge in after she became Mrs. Malcolm Granger. Insistent tapping on her door brought her out of her reverie as the housekeeper, Mrs. Turner, hurried in. Oh, Nurse Andrews, Reuben said to bring you right away to Mr. Granger's room. The doctor is already on his way. Pauline hurried after Mrs. Turner. What is the matter with Malcolm? Has he had another turn? Why didn't someone call me sooner? Mrs. Turner was flustered and near tears. Reuben brought Mr. Granger his early morning tea, like he always does. It was he who found. Pauline rushed to Malcolm. She felt for his pulse. Then she put her ear to his chest, but she already knew. Malcolm was cold, very cold as death. Pauline rested her head on his body and wept. I will notify my Granger's lawyer of the tragedy, Reuben said. He will attend to matters. Pauline hardly heard him. Oh, Malcolm, you said you loved me. Couldn't you have waited another day? She whispered. The assistant's eyes opened wide and her jaw dropped as she stared at the two walking into the store. Oh, it's Ronald MacDonald, she though relieved. It must be some sort of promotion. Then she looked at the other male. He thrust his pelvis provocatively toward her as she stared at the bulge in his very small, very tight purple leather shorts. Like what you're seeing? He asked and blew her a kiss. Shocked, her gaze quickly swung to his friend. Why, you're not Ronald MacDonald, she accused. No, he said, feigning surprise. He touched his lime green, calf-length, satin pants. Would Ronald be as well dressed as me? He asked. Well, you've got the same hair coloring as him, she retorted. But he can't cook hamburgers, dearie, and doesn't like children, his friend said. No, we've come to select a gown. Well, Nigel has. I'm going to help him. What? Is this some sort of joke? No, it's no joke. We're going to the gay Mardi Gras in Sydney and we're on a float. I'm going as a fairy queen. I found my dress, a lovely pink, frothy one. Now we're looking for Nigel. He wants to be a bride. You can't hire one of our gowns. The assistant was outraged. These are for proper brides. Not for some. I won't hire you one. You have to go as something else. Oh, did you hear that, Nigel? He blew the assistant a kiss. Well, you've got no choice, dearie. The law says you must. Frustrated and angry, the woman watched as a gown was selected. 34. That night the assistant and her flatmate were eating pizza and watching the procession on TV. I don't care what you say, Leslie, that dress is not going back on the racks. She reached for her glass of wine. They were both so. Well, you know. I couldn't hire that gown out again, without thinking of them. Then you do what you feel is best, Magda, her flatmate said, running her long, red fingernail up her friend's thigh. You always do what is right. 35. The Seance. The seance was created as an exercise in humor. I have been to seances and the scene, as is described, could be a factual portrayal of almost any one of them. 000. Is this the place we're looking for? Ruby asked, peering with one eye through a narrow gap in the tall wooden fence. Her view was limited by the size of the gap and what appeared to be the spindly branches of a conifer growing against the fence on the other side. Looking beyond the long, narrow, overgrown front yard and a curving row of tall trees separating the yard down the middle, she could just make out the outline of a dark brick Federation-style cottage. I've got a bad feeling about this place, Ruby thought. I hope Pauline knows what she's doing. Turning to her friend, she asked, "Are you sure this is the place?" Pauline reread the address on the slip of paper she was holding and looked again at the numbers painted on the fence. Yes, number 61. This is it. Come on. The rusting hinges on the gate squeaked a protest as Pauline eased it open and stepped into the yard. Taking a deep breath, Ruby slowly followed. Dark conifers on either side of the cracked concrete paths leaned toward each other, creating a tunnel of greenery to the old house, forcing the two women to walk single file up the narrow path. Ruby moved closer to Pauline, trying to shelter her large body behind her friend's smaller one as they walked toward the front door. Pauline stopped and Ruby bumped into her. "Ruby, what's the matter with you? You're closer to me than my shadow. If you want to walk in my footsteps, let me get out of them first," she said. "Sorry," Ruby mumbled. The poorly lit funnel effect created by the foliage made her nervous. "It feels like we're entering into the twilight zone," she thought. "Oh, I really hope Pauline knows what she's getting us into." Pauline pressed the brass button on the front door and a faint ring echoed somewhere inside. Pauline smiled at her friend. "Well, it's our first time and we made it," she said. "Aren't you excited?" Before Ruby could answer, the door was flung open and a small, thin woman, about 60 years of age, stood there. "Welcome, ladies. Do come in," she said graciously. Her quick movement as she stepped aside caused the skirt of her mottled brown chiffon layered dress to swirl against her legs. Is this your first time to one of our meetings?" she asked. Before either woman could reply, she went on, "I thought so. I never forget a face. My name is Lavinia Cook. And you are, of course, Pauline and Ruby." "Yes, I took your phone call saying you'd be coming. Welcome, ladies. Now, if you just follow me, we will join the rest of our little assembly." The two women were led into a room where about 15 people were standing about in small groups, chatting. They looked up as the women entered and, not recognizing Pauline and Ruby, smiled absently at them, and went on with their conversations. 36. Do make